This happened last fall. I've been hiking for years now, and I usually stick to solo trips. The quiet is something I've always appreciated. But just like with anything, there are risks. Every once in a while, you have an experience that sticks with you, and not in a good way. I've always thought of myself as prepared. I've camped in some of the roughest conditions, dealt with unpredictable weather, and even had a few close calls with wildlife. But nothing, and I mean nothing, even came close to the kind of fear I felt that night. After that trip, I don't hike alone anymore. It started off normal enough, just me, my pack, and the occasional rustling in the trees. The trail was quiet, which is exactly how I like it. This wasn't my first time in these woods, but I had never hiked this specific trail before. It was a bit more remote, tucked away from the usual weekend crowds. The sun had started dipping behind the trees when I reached a clearing to set up camp. Something about the air felt off. You ever get that feeling like something is watching you, but you can't see anything? That's exactly what hit me as I unpacked my gear. I tried to shake it off. It was probably just my imagination, a trick of the quiet. But as I set up my tent, I noticed something weird. The woods were completely silent. No birds, no crickets, no wind, just this oppressive stillness pressing in from all sides. I told myself it was nothing and focused on getting my fire going. But that feeling, that gnawing unease, never really left. I was halfway through my dinner when I heard it. A branch snapping. Not the small kind either. Something big had stepped on it. I grabbed my flashlight and swept it across the trees, but there was nothing there. The fire crackled behind me, casting long, twitching shadows. I told myself it was probably a deer and went back to eating. But then I heard another snap. Closer this time. I stood up, shining my flashlight into the trees again. Still nothing. My stomach twisted, and that's when I realized I wasn't hearing just one set of footsteps. There were two. One from the right side of my camp, the other from the left. They were slow, deliberate, almost like they were circling me. My breath hitched, and I gripped my knife, scanning the darkness. Then, just as suddenly as they started, they stopped. I barely slept that night. Every sound made my skin crawl. I kept my knife close, my flashlight closer, and forced myself to stay awake as long as I could. The fire burned low, casting just enough light to see the edge of the clearing. At some point, exhaustion won, and I dozed off. I woke up to something rustling right outside my tent. My breath caught in my throat. It was subtle, slow, like someone, or something, was brushing against the fabric. I clenched my knife, listening, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Then I saw it. A shadow, tall and thin, blocking out the faint moonlight filtering through the tent. It stood there, unmoving, watching. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just sat there, gripping my knife, praying it would go away. And then, after what felt like an eternity, it did. The shadow shifted, the sound of footsteps retreating into the trees. I waited until the first light of dawn before I dared to move. I packed up as fast as I could, my hands shaking the entire time. The second I was ready, I started hiking back. I didn't care how tired I was. I needed to get out of those woods. But as I made my way down the trail, I saw something that stopped me cold. About 50 feet from my campsite, deep in the dirt, were footprints, but they weren't from a deer. They were long, narrow, almost human, but stretched, distorted, like whatever made them didn't walk the way we do. And the worst part, they led up to my tent, and then back into the trees. I don't know what was out there that night. I don't want to know. I made it back to my car without looking back once. That was my last solo trip. Now I always hike with someone else, because whatever was in those woods, it wasn't alone. But if you think that was over, unfortunately, you were wrong. I broke into a full sprint. My boots pounded against the dirt trail. Breath ragged as I forced my legs to carry me faster. The flashlight bobbed wildly in my grip, its beam barely cutting through the suffocating darkness. But no matter how fast I ran, I could hear it. The thing behind me. Its footsteps were wrong, too long, too deliberate, yet eerily silent between each crunch of leaves. It wasn't just chasing me, it was toying with me. Branches clawed at my arms as I tore through the narrow path, my backpack weighing me down like an anchor. I needed to ditch it. The straps dug into my shoulders as I fumbled to rip it off mid-stride. My fingers were numb, shaking, and just as I yanked one strap free, my foot caught on something. A root, a rock. I never saw it. All I knew was the sickening lurch as my body pitched forward, the world tilting in an instant before I slammed into the ground. The impact knocked the air from my lungs, my flashlight flying from my grasp and spinning wildly on the dirt, its beam flickering across the trees. I barely had time to push myself up before I heard it. Heavy footsteps closing in. I twisted around, gasping, scrambling to get my bearings. The flashlight's beam swung just enough to catch a glimpse of movement. A shape, massive and wrong, shifting between the trees. I couldn't see its face. I didn't want to. Panic surged through me as I scrambled back to my feet. My backpack was tangled in a mess of roots, the strap hooked tight. No time. I yanked, cursed, yanked again. It wouldn't budge. My pulse roared in my ears as another step landed behind me, too close. I made a decision. A stupid one, maybe, but I had no choice. I let the backpack go. Heart hammering, I lunged for my flashlight and ran. Harder, faster than before, my legs burning with each stride. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. The trees blurred past me, the path twisting in erratic directions, but I didn't care if I got lost, as long as I got away. Then, just as I thought I might outrun it, the trail suddenly dropped beneath me. A sharp, gut-wrenching moment of weightlessness. My foot stepped into nothing, and then I was falling. The world spun as I tumbled down an unseen slope, crashing through brush and dirt, my body rolling violently before slamming into something hard. Pain exploded through my side, knocking the breath from me again. I coughed, groaning, vision swimming. My flashlight had landed a few feet away, its flickering glow barely lighting the steep incline I had just fallen down. I could barely process the pain before I heard it. Above me, standing at the edge of the drop-off, silhouetted against the darkness, was the thing. It had followed me down. My body screamed in protest, but I forced myself up, staggering toward the road. Every inch of me ached, my ribs throbbing, my lungs burning. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. The headlights blazed through the darkness, growing brighter, closer. An engine roared, tires skidding against the dirt. I stumbled forward, waving frantically, my voice hoarse. "Stop! Please, stop!" The car jerked to a halt, its beams cutting through the trees. A door flew open, and heavy footsteps pounded toward me. A man, maybe in his 40s, with tired eyes and a flannel shirt, rushed to my side. "Jesus, kid, are you all right?" His voice was sharp with concern. "What the hell are you doing out here?" I tried to answer, but my breath came in short, ragged gasps. I turned, chest tightening, expecting to see it. The thing. But the woods were empty. No shifting shadows, no impossible shape slithering toward me, just stillness. I swayed on my feet, exhausted, and the man reached out, steadying me. "Come on, let's get you out of here." He helped me into the passenger seat, and the moment the door shut, I let out a shaky breath. The car rumbled back to life, headlights stretching into the endless road ahead. As we pulled away, I stared into the rearview mirror, my heart hammering. Nothing. Just trees. Just darkness. I sank into the seat, my pulse slowly beginning to steady. I was safe. At least for now. In 2021, the world was still reeling from the aftermath of the pandemic. The cities were quieter, businesses still recovering, and people hesitant to return to their old lives. For someone like me, a writer struggling with a creative block, the stillness was suffocating. I needed an escape, a place to clear my mind and force myself to write again. That's how I ended up renting an isolated cabin deep in the Montana wilderness. The place was perfect. No cell service, no internet, just an old radio and a wood-burning stove. The nearest town was an hour's drive away, and the only sign of life was a dirt road that stretched back towards civilization. It was exactly what I needed. The first few days were peaceful. I spent my time hiking, collecting firewood, and staring at the blank pages in my notebook. The solitude was refreshing, even if the silence at night felt unnerving at times. Then, on the fourth day, something changed. It started with small things. A chair slightly out of place. My jacket, which I had left on the hook by the door, draped over the couch instead. I dismissed it as my own absent-mindedness. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard something outside. Footsteps, not the rustling of animals or the creaking of old wood, but slow, deliberate footsteps circling the cabin. I held my breath, listening as they stopped just beneath my bedroom window. Then silence. I convinced myself it was paranoia. Maybe a deer, maybe the wind shifting the trees in a way that mimicked human movement. But the next morning I found something that made my blood run cold. A single boot print in the snow, large, fresh, unmistakably human. It led from the woods to my window and then disappeared back into the tree line. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a lost hiker had wandered too close, gotten spooked, and left. But as the days passed, more things felt off. My flashlight, which I swore I left on the table, was now outside on the porch. My notebook, once filled with empty pages, now had a single sentence scrawled on the last page in jagged, unfamiliar handwriting. "You shouldn't be here." I locked the doors that night, wedged a chair under the handle, and kept my hunting knife under my pillow. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle of the wind felt like something, or someone, lurking just outside. Then, around 3 a.m., my world shattered. A knock at the door. Soft at first, then harder, more insistent. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. Whoever was out there wasn't saying anything, just knocking, slow, rhythmic, waiting. I grabbed my knife and crept toward the window, peering through the edge of the curtain. The porch was empty. Then my phone, which had been dead for days, vibrated from across the room. A single notification lit up the screen. A photo of me standing at the window. I didn't think. I grabbed my keys, bolted out the back door, and sprinted to my truck. The moment I turned the ignition, my headlights illuminated something in the trees. A figure. Tall, unmoving, and watching me. I didn't stay to see who it was. I tore down the dirt road, not stopping until I reached town. The next morning, I convinced a ranger to escort me back to the cabin to grab my things. The place was undisturbed. No footprints, no strange messages, nothing. As if no one had ever been there at all. I never went back. But sometimes late at night, I wonder, was I just another story for them? Another face in the window? Another visitor who left before they could find out what happens when you stay? Or did I leave just in time? Years passed, and the memory of that night still haunted me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some cruel prank, or maybe my exhaustion had played tricks on me. But deep down, I knew better. I couldn't let it go. The unanswered questions gnawed at me. Who was watching me? What would have happened if I had opened the door? So in 2024, I made the decision to return. Not alone this time. I convinced two of my closest friends, Mark and Dylan, to come with me. We packed supplies, including cameras and weapons, determined to uncover the truth. The drive back was unsettling. The dirt road leading to the cabin looked the same, but the air felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't quite describe. When we arrived, everything was as I had left it. The same old wooden structure, the same eerie quiet. That first night, nothing happened. We drank, shared ghost stories, and laughed about my paranoia. It almost felt normal. Almost. Then, on the second night, things changed. Around 2 a.m., the knocking started again. Slow, deliberate, just like before. Mark, ever the skeptic, grabbed a flashlight and flung the door open. No one was there. But in the snow right at our doorstep were footprints, leading up to the cabin, but none leading away. A chill ran through me. We searched the perimeter, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The woods felt alive, as if we were being watched from all angles. Dylan swore he saw movement between the trees, but when we ran toward it, there was nothing there. Then my phone vibrated. Another photo. This time it wasn't of me. It was of all three of us, sitting in the cabin earlier that evening, taken from inside the cabin. Panic set in. We grabbed our gear and bolted for the truck, barely bothering to lock the door behind us. As we drove away, I made the mistake of glancing in the rearview mirror. A figure stood in the doorway, watching us leave, silent, unmoving. I don't know who or what they were, but I do know one thing. I'll never go back again.